So a couple months ago, we got a sectional, and before this, we actually had a set of couches. So we had a 3-seater, a 2-seater, and then there was space in the middle where actually we had my charging nightstand. So that had space for chargers and it had a drawer for all the remotes, and obviously we had enough space to have end tables to have a spot to put our drink down. But now with this sectional, it's kind of a problem. So let's take care of that. But before we get started, if you are new here, I am Anika and I am here to demystify DIY and inspire and empower you to build all of the things. I have a ton of projects, tutorials, free guides and courses, and I will add a link to the most important ones in the description below. Now, let's go and build. I am using 1x6 boards for the sofa table, and the length of it is equal to the length of the sofa. So in my case, that is almost 105 inches. So I started out with 10-foot boards. And then we have some dividers inside the table. So I set up a stop block and made the cuts for that. I have the detailed plans for this sofa table linked in the description below, but the key is to measure the exact length and height of the sofa so you can make the table accordingly. I planned on having 3 inside power points inside the table, so I measured and marked exactly where they would be, and then I measured the size of the outlets that I had and marked that onto the boards. You want to be about 1/8 of an inch bigger than the actual size of the outlet so that it can slide in easily. And then I cut that out using a jigsaw. And the outlet fits right in. So I went ahead and made the cutouts for the rest of the 2 outlets. This is a good time to sand all of the boards down. So the boards that is going to be the base as well as the 2 boards that are going to be on the sides. Next step is attaching the dividers. So I measured and marked exactly where they were going to be. I used wood glue and I used these new clamps that I just got. They are pretty great for holding things at a right angle. So I used those to hold things in place and added some brad nails. And of course I repeated that for the other dividers as well. And that is the bottom board with all of the cutouts and the sides and the dividers attached. And now it is time to attach the boards on the sides to build the box. So I used wood glue and finish nails to attach both of the boards. With the box built, I thought this was a great time to stain this box. So I used a pre-stain conditioner followed by a dark walnut wood stain. Now, while the stain dried, I decided it was a great time to cut down all the plywood that is going to make the cabinet that goes on the side, as well as all of the doors. Now, for all of the doors that are going to be visible outside of that sofa table, I am using walnut plywood. I actually had a whole bunch of leftover walnut plywood cutoffs from previous projects, and I had just enough to make all of the doors, which is a total win-win. So I ripped down all of the boards on my table saw and then used my miter saw to cut them down to length. Now it would have been really awesome if I had one single sheet that ran through so we had a continuous grain, but first of all, 110-inch, 105-inch long plywood, walnut plywood does not exist. And second, there is nothing better than using up a whole bunch of walnut plywood offcuts that I had been saving. I was able to get all the pieces that I needed from all of the offcuts that I had. So that is a win. To quickly get the spacing, I'm going to use my spacers and set up just to make sure all the measurements and dimensions are perfect. Now at the end over here, we're gonna have the door come in, and we wanna have this overlap on top of the door. So I am going to mark exactly where this ends and then mark the exact thickness of the door so I can extend it that much and make that cut. And I'm gonna use that line and use a scrap piece of the plywood and mark exactly where I need to make the cut. Since the stain had dried, I wiped it all down with a tack cloth and applied the top coat. And while the top coat dried, I applied edge banding to all of the plywood. So for the walnut plywood, I am using walnut edge banding, and the side cabinet is made using birch plywood, and I'm using birch edge banding. If you want to learn more about how to cover plywood edges using edge banding, I have a detailed video, and I will add a link to that in the description below. Now it's time to build the side cabinet, which is basically a bunch of plywood boards that I'm going to attach using wood glue and finish nails. Now, one of the things with this side cabinet to remember is that you really don't need to apply edge banding to all edges of these plywood boards. All you need to cover are the front edges. So I messed up a little bit. I actually forgot something. So this last piece over here, I planned for it to be stationary. So I don't want it to be able to open because we have a Google Home, etc. that's going to go over here. And then we're going to have a little hole here to pass the cables through the back, and then it comes into the PowerPoint that's going to be over here. So this will open, but not this. And because I don't want to put nails on the top, I am planning to glue it down, clamp it and glue it down. But I already applied the top coat. I stained the whole thing and applied the top coat all over here. So I'm gonna go ahead and sand this part down so that we can glue this down over here. And actually starting with this is important because this is the stationary one, and then we're going to decide the spacing and install the rest of the doors. So I sanded down the edge, applied wood glue, and clamped down the board to let it dry. And the other thing that I should have done before I built the box was to make the little cutouts for the wires to come through. Now, I used a router to do this because I'd already built the box. But if you are doing it before building the box, you can easily use a jigsaw to do this. And because I did this afterwards, I also had to touch up the stain. Next up were the holes for the hinges on all of the doors. And then before I attached the hinges, I decided it was a good idea to apply the finish to all of the walnut plywood. For the walnut plywood, I am using boiled linseed oil, and I love how the color just pops. And then I attached the hinges to the doors. Now, to install these doors into the table, I used a spacer and marked exactly where the hinges were supposed to sit. And then I marked the location of the screws. Now, because it was so tight in this table that I couldn't get my drill in there to make the pilot holes, I actually used a small manual screwdriver and started the holes. And because it is pine and it's soft, I was able to make those starter holes. And then to install, originally I started off with the screwdriver, and then I decided to get my 90-degree adapter, and that made the whole process so much easier. I made a 1-inch hole in the corner to help the wires pass through. It did sort of break my heart to make that hole in that beautiful walnut plywood. Then I added the inset power strips into the cutouts and attached them. And now there is one last thing that we need to do. To support the entire table, I'm going to be using 2x4 boards to build the stand. And these are not going to be visible at all, so it really doesn't matter what they look like. So I cut down the boards and then I put them all together using wood glue and screws. I built 3 of these to support my entire table, but you would need more or less depending on the total length of your table. So it's time to install, and I realized I made a mistake, which is the fact that I made the holes on the side door on the wrong side. They needed to be on this side. Instead, I made them on this side. So I've been trying to figure out the best way to cover them up. And I thought about using wood filler and then applying some walnut veneer on top of it, basically the edge banding that I have. But then I thought it would be great if I had a way to actually just have plugs to drop in. And then I do have a laser, so I used the laser to cut out these circles out of 1/4 inch walnut. So I am actually using these and dropping them in, and I dropped it in over here so you can still see, I mean, this does not have oil on it yet, so it's not finished, but you could still probably see the circle kind of shape, but at least it wouldn't be as blatant. And now it is time to install. So I placed all of the 2x4 stands sort of evenly across the entire wall. And I also brought in the cabinet for the end. And then I brought the table in. And now, of course, I need to attach all of these stands to the table. So I did that with screws from the bottom. And then I installed the door for the side cabinet. And if you notice, you can barely see those holes that I had messed up. And then I plugged in all of the cords, pushed the sectional into place, and now I can plug in all of the things. So I plugged in the Google Home. There's a nice little compartment to store all of the remotes. Plugged in more power cords that can be used as needed, so we can just pull it out when we need it. I mean, I think we have more than enough power in this entire sofa table. And of course, we've got that little cabinet on the side because why waste storage space, right? So we can store small things, little games or books, and that is it. Remember, I have the detailed plans for you to build this and a step-by-step tutorial including all of the supplies that I used. Everything is linked in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.